Hey everyone, Chase Elleby, Joel Williams from Williams Elleby, and today we're going to talk to you about how medical bills and expenses are handled in Georgia personal injury cases. So this is sort of a heavy topic, and we're going to try to hit the highlights as best we can in this video. But Joel, let's talk about, first, when you think of medical bills and expenses, what's the first thing you have to do, in order to handle them in Georgia personal injury cases?
Well, you got to get the records to support the expenses that are incurred, right? So as soon as you're injured or you realize that you're injured, you need to get in to see the doctor so they can start generating medical records that are going to support those expenses that are the charges that they're giving for whatever treatment they're rendering to you.
Right.
I'm saying the word giving a lot today.
Right.
But anyway, you got to get in to see the doctor. You got to get your injuries documented because you're not going to be able to support whatever bills you have unless you've got the records to support it.
Yeah, that's a good point. A lot of times, we've talked about it or had other videos where we talk about how we send demands when we send them to insurance companies and things like that. When we send these demands to insurance companies, they're always cross-checking the bills with the records, right? Because any provider can list 100 dates of services and charge whatever they are the fair market prices for those things. But if you don't have bills to support that treatment or that visit actually happened that day, then the insurance company or the jury or whoever it is you're presenting the claim to is absolutely not going to consider it. So,
the records to support the bills.
Correct. Sorry, the records to support the bills. And also, too, specific for Georgia, and this is probably the same in other states, I just haven't looked it up, but as far as the medical records are concerned, you want to get those medical records with an affidavit certifying that they're true and accurate medical records, and that's usually from the medical custodian, the doctor's office, or wherever it is where you get those records from. So that's very important. The next thing you need to do is you need to know all the insurance that's available to you for your medical treatment. And you're probably thinking, Chase, well, my health insurance, right? So that's the first thing you look for, but obviously a lot of people don't have health insurance, okay? So if you don't have health insurance, we always get the question, well, how do I get treatment? What do I do? Well, you could always go to the emergency room. You could always go to urgent care. They're going to treat you even if you don't have health insurance, but you're going to get a huge bill. The other thing you can look to, and this is, of course, specific for Georgia, but I know other states have these sorts of arrangements, you could treat on a lien. And that basically means that the medical provider that you see that treats you will either agree to treat you but not charge you until your case gets resolved, right? So if you treat with the orthopedic surgeon and you have $10,000 in medical bills, they'll just hold on to those $10,000 in bills. They're not going to ask you to pay it. But once your case gets resolved, you just have to pay them back from the settlement. Now, some doctor's offices will do liens directly, and then there's also companies that are basically, I call them health insurance companies for folks who've been injured by someone else's negligence that have contracts and things like that with medical providers that will set up that treatment for you.
Yep. Another place to look is your own automobile insurance policy, if it's an automobile wreck, because you probably have, it's usually not a ton, but you probably have what we call medical payments coverage. In some states, it's called PIP coverage, but in Georgia, it's medical payments coverage, and it might be $1,000, $2,000, $5,000, sometimes $10,000 or $25,000 that you can use to pay your medical bills, and it pays regardless of whether you're at fault in the wreck or not. So
good point.
That's a really good place to look to try to offset some of your out-of-pocket medical expenses. But you also want to know, when we're talking about the insurance that's available, how much the at-fault person has in insurance. Because if you are like most Americans and you're living paycheck to paycheck and you don't have $50,000 sitting in the bank to just pay for all these medical bills, you need to know where all these sources of payment are going to come from and how much is available. So if the at-fault person only has $25,000 of insurance coverage, then you're going to be in a pickle if there's no if you can't treat on a lien, if you don't have med pay, and all of a sudden you just jump headfirst into a $50,000 surgery.
Right.
Because somebody's got to pay for it, and you're going to be left holding the bag if you don't exhaust maybe less expensive options, if they're even an option for you. Now, like if you just absolutely have to have a surgery immediately to save your life, then you have to have the surgery. But if there are other means available that you could try first that are less expensive, when there's limited insurance available, then that might be something you need to do.
Yeah.
Okay, so going back to medical bills, and how they're handled in the state of Georgia, you're also allowed to claim past medical bills as well as future medical expenses if you can come up with a reasonable estimate for what those expenses are going to be. So, for example, if your treatment is going to extend out over a long period of time, in most personal injury cases in Georgia, you have 2 years from the date of the incident to file the lawsuit. So what if you have to treat for 3, 4, 5 years, right?
Right.
Well, you got to file the lawsuit in the 2-year period. So say your case goes to trial, and it goes to trial while you're still treating. Well, you need to go to your doctors, or your attorneys will go to your doctors and say, all right, look, what is this person's future prognosis? What kind of treatment are they going to need, and what's it going to cost? Or what's a reasonable estimate for what it's going to cost? And then you'll get that, and then you present that to the jury. And sometimes you do that with pre-suit settlement offers to insurance companies too. I'll tell you, insurance companies don't always put a lot of weight on future surgical estimates and things like that. But it can be helpful if you're trying to get your case settled without filing a lawsuit.
Yeah, that's right. Another question we get asked as it relates to medical bills is like, who pays for these medical bills? And I talked,
that's a big one.
Yeah, right. And I talked earlier about the healthcare, or Joel did healthcare. I was talking about the liens and things like that, where you can treat and you don't have to pay right away. But a lot of times, let's say you have health insurance coverage, you're going to have your copays, your deductibles, all those little out-of-pocket expenses. Now, unless there's a lien that's been put on that treatment, meaning, hey, don't pay anything until your case gets resolved, you have to pay those one-off bills. I tell our clients, you need to pay those one-off bills, because most of the time, and I'll give an example, it's like an ambulance charge, right? Mm-hmm. So if someone gets in a wreck here in Georgia, if they're taken to the hospital via ambulance, hopefully the ambulance is going to bill the health insurance. A lot of times they don't, because they just don't have the health insurance information. And our clients will get that bill in the mail. And if it's the 31st day and you haven't contacted the ambulance company, or you haven't paid, straight to collections. Mm-hmm. So I always say, like, if you get a bill in the mail and it's not a lien, you've got to start paying it, right? Mm-hmm. A lot of times through these providers, you can pick up the phone and call them and say, hey, I got this bill for 10 grand or whatever it is. Or let's say you have a $2,500 deductible. Like, I can't pay that out of pocket right now. They'll set up a payment plan, just something to keep them at bay, so they don't, send those bills to collections while your case is still pending. So that's with, to answer the question, who pays for those bills? Hopefully it's your health insurance. It's hopefully gonna, if you don't have the health insurance, you can do it on a lien. If it's those one-off expenses, you have to just pay them as you go. Now, with medical payments coverage, like we talked about earlier, that some auto insurance policies have, you can use that MedPay or medical payments coverage to pay those deductibles, those copays, and things like that. So it's super helpful to have that. Check your declarations page for your auto policy to see if you have it. And I'd even go so far as to call your agent to see what it would cost just to have, $2,000, $5,000, or $10,000 in that coverage. You'd probably be surprised at how inexpensive it is to have that MedPay.
Yep. And one little trick that some people are able, it's not a trick, it's just a strategy that some people are able to use to keep themselves out of collections, is to set up that payment plan and pay a little bit along until your case resolves, right, when you can fully satisfy the bill. Because like Chase said, most health providers are more than happy to set up that payment plan instead of selling your debt to a collection company where they're going to get pennies on the dollar, right?
That's right.
So as long as they know you're addressing it and not just sweeping it under the rug, then they usually won't send you to collections. Just don't ignore it. So another important thing with medical bills in personal injury cases in Georgia is to make sure that you don't miss anything. So the most common types of situations where we see people miss medical bills would be an emergency room visit. So the biggest hospital here in Cobb County, Georgia is Wellstar Kennesaw. So they have a big trauma center, emergency room. Most people that are involved in trauma go there. But you go there, you're going to have a hospital charge. You're going to have a ER physician's charge. You're probably going to have some radiology charges. If you have to have some kind of procedure that requires anesthesia, you'll have an anesthesia group bill. And then also with surgeries, you get those smaller collateral charges as well. Like you'll have the doctor's charge, you'll have the facility charge, you'll have the anesthesia charge and all that. So just because you have one bill from Kennestone, this facility charge, doesn't mean that's all the charges. So don't just haul off and say, here's my medical bill. Make sure you have everything when you present that to whoever you're asking to pay for them.
Right. It's almost never the case that you go to a provider and there's just one bill associated with the treatment you received, right? Like all the examples you listed, like you can even go so far as like if you have a surgery where you have implants, whether it's screws, plates, and things like that, there's probably a charge for that somewhere if it's not embedded in the facility charge. So
labs.
Right,
blood
labs,
work,
yeah, all that type of stuff.
prescription charges,
Yeah.
all that stuff.
Yeah, exactly. So, all right. So another question we get is, and also dealing with medical expenses, is who has to be paid back? Obviously, the lien folks have to be paid back, like we talked about, whether that's a direct lien with the provider. Hospitals file liens all the time. That's one example. Chiropractic groups, medical groups, things like that. But also potentially your health insurance company might have to be paid back for what they paid out, right? So to keep this as basic and simple as possible, because we could talk for days on this specific topic, but let's say you go to the emergency room, you've got $1,000 of charges that the hospital submits to your health insurance. Of that $1,000, your health insurance, pursuant to their contract with the hospital, pays $300, okay? They write off the $700 difference. Well, depending on the type of health insurance plan you have, if you get a recovery from a third party, meaning if there's an at-fault party that has an insurance policy or a company that pays you a settlement, if you get that recovery, you have to pay back the health insurance company what they paid out on your behalf. Again, I can get real deep into the weeds on this, but for the most part, and I'm just gonna keep this simple, and there are probably a million questions for all of our loyal followers. If it's a self-funded ERISA plan, meaning the company pays for the healthcare plan, then federal law applies, and you have to look to the plan language to determine whether or not they need to be paid back. If it's not a self-funded plan, if it's your standard Humana, Aetna, Blue Cross, then Georgia law applies, and Georgia has a great rule, a great code section in case law that says if you haven't been made whole from a settlement, meaning if whatever money you receive from either a settlement or a judgment, if it doesn't fully and completely compensate you for all your injuries, not just your medical bills, but past pain and suffering, future pain and suffering, all of it, if you haven't been made whole, then they don't get anything back in recovery. And it's very, very difficult for health insurance companies to prove that you've been made whole if you settle a case pre-suit.
Yep.
So,
and the made whole rule is Georgia specific.
Correct.
There probably are other states that have similar laws, but there's some states that say you got to pay it back even if it's just a regular health insurance policy.
That's right.
Again, talk to a lawyer
Right.
and find out what you need to do, because the last thing you want to do is settle your case and then all of a sudden find out you got to pay a health insurance company back $10,000.
Right.
And then you have nothing.
Yeah.
So the other thing to remember is, well, a few things, and we're not going to go deep in the woods with this, but just remember these things. You don't, under current tax law, you don't have to pay taxes on money that you get for medical bills, at least under federal law. So you don't have to pay federal income tax on money you get for medical bills. So you don't have to worry about that. Also, remember that you only are entitled to receive compensation for injuries and bills that are related to, or bills that are related to injuries or treatment for injuries that you received in the incident. So if you go to your primary care physician and you see your primary physician for, say, your neck is hurting, but then you also see your primary care physician for diabetes management, or you've got something else going on, the flu or whatever, you don't get to recover for the expenses associated with your diabetes management. It's just for the treatment for your neck.
Right. And that can be tricky sometimes too, because like to Joel's point, you go to your primary care physician, they're going to do the primary care physician type stuff. And unless the bill's, pretty detailed and itemized, you might have a $450 PCP charge or primary care physician charge. but a portion of that was, to check your neck and
Yeah.
do all that. So it can be very difficult. You can't just submit that whole bill and say, pay me back for that. So
Yeah, exactly. It's only the things that are related to the incident that you're being treated for. So not pre-existing stuff or other medical conditions that aren't related to the injuries you've received. But generally, that's a lot of things to consider with medical bills. If you get ready to send a demand to the other insurance company, you want to itemize those bills out, put them in your demand, attach them to the demand so that it's not just what you're saying, there's documentation to support it. And it's the same type thing that attorneys do if you go to trial. We're generally going to summarize all of your medical bills. We're going to list them out. We're going to add them up to make it real easy for the jury or the judge to see exactly what they are. And then we're going to support that summary with the bills themselves. So it's not just us saying it, it's us proving it.
Right.
And then, if push comes to shove, then you have to get your doctors to say, yeah, those charges are reasonable and customary and they're related to the injuries that my patient or our client received in this incident. So
that's right. Yeah, and real quick too, the bills the charges rather have to be reasonable charges. Mm-hmm. And that's probably one of the biggest things that we see defense firms and things like that attack, if there's anything to attack with the medical bills, right? Yeah. If it's usual and customary for you to have a shoulder surgery that costs $40,000, you can't go and ask for $2 million on a shoulder surgery. So
yeah, you might ask for $2 million if you calculate it in pain and suffering, but
correct, but not for the surgery itself.
Yeah, not for the bill itself. So, well, that's how medical bills are handled in Georgia from a 10,000-foot view, without getting too far into the weeds.
That's
so
right.
I hope this video has been helpful to you. If so, give us a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button. Otherwise, we will see you next week.